In our headlines on this Thursday afternoon, February 23rd. The Bank of Korea is holding its benchmark interest rate steady at 3.5%, in line with widespread market expectations. Seoul, Washington and Tokyo staged a comprehensive missile defense drill on Wednesday amid Pyongyang's most recent ballistic missile launches. Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin speaks of strengthening Russia's nuclear forces ahead of the grim one-year anniversary of his invasion of Ukraine. Seoul Central Bank has brought an end to a year of relentless rate hikes. Following their latest policy meeting, officials agreed to keep the benchmark interest rate unchanged at 3.5%. Our finance correspondent Kim Hyun-sung reports.
The Bank of Korea has reined in its longest-running series of rate hikes. For now, the central bank announced in Thursday's Monetary Policy Committee meeting that it will keep its current interest rate at 3.5%. This plateau in rates comes after 10 hikes in the last 18 months, including 7 consecutive raises before this latest decision. The central bank's decision could lead to some concerns. With January's inflation rate still hovering over 5%, South Korea is not out of the woods yet when it comes to high consumer prices. There are also concerns about the weakening of the Korean won against the dollar, expected to be aggravated when the Federal Reserve moves forward with more rate hikes. But with slower economic growth projected for the country and inflation starting to come under control, the Bank of Korea is treading lightly when it comes to the pace of monetary tightening. The bank expects a 1.6% growth for the year 2023, slightly revised down from its original 1.7% growth forecast. The central bank also shaved a percentage point off of its previous projection for this year's inflation, from 3.6% to 3.5%. However, Thursday's rate freeze does not signal an end to monetary tightening. The central bank intends to keep borrowing costs high and has made clear that more hikes may come after keeping a close watch on South Korea's economy. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
Staying on the local front, wholesale prices rebounded last month, meaning consumers here are looking ahead to higher price tags. Early data by the Bank of Korea on this Thursday shows producer prices rose 0.4% on month in January, following 2 months of retreats. Bank officials are linking the rebound to the 4% jump in utility bills for businesses, including gas, which soared 11% on month, the highest since the year 1980. Producer prices are now 5.1% higher than they were last January. Over in the U.S., Federal Reserve authorities are poised to maintain their tight monetary policy for the time being amid efforts to bring inflation down to the target range of 2% from the current 6.4%. Our Lee Soo-jin reports.
The U.S. Fed remains determined to bring inflation back to its target level and cool the economy. According to the minutes from their most recent meeting released Wednesday local time, most Fed officials agreed that a 0.25 percentage points rate increase was appropriate. The Federal Open Market Committee, or FOMC, approved the 25 basis points increase during its January 31st to February 1st meeting, raising the target range to 4.5 to 4.75%. The central bank has raised its benchmark rate over the course of 8 meetings after starting off from a near-zero policy rate last March. The minutes, however, showed that there was a small number of participants that still favored a 50 basis point increase. All of the policymakers agreed that ongoing increases would be necessary to cool inflation. The officials remain steadfast in their opinion on maintaining a restrictive policy stance until economic data shows that inflation is on a downward trend to the 2% target. That's expected to take some time, according to the minutes. More recent economic data suggests that the economy is continuing to grow. More than 500,000 jobs were added in the U.S. in January, nearly triple what economists had forecast. The unemployment rate is currently at 3.4%, the lowest level in over 50 years. Historically, in a tight labor market, employers are forced to raise wages, which pushes inflation upwards. This suggests that the Fed will keep up rate increases, but as many global central banks have raised interest rates, there are also reasons to believe that inflation might soon be under control. Meanwhile, after the meeting minutes were published, stocks slipped slightly. The S&P 500 fell 0.4%, while the Dow Jones lost 0.5%. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
On the security front, South Korean military authorities and their U.S. as well as Japanese counterparts launched a missile defense drill back on Wednesday in the EC. The drill follows a series of ballistic missile tests by North Korea in recent days. Our defense correspondent Oh Soo-young has details.
South Korea, the United States and Japan staged a combined missile defense drill Wednesday, enhancing their joint response to deterring North Korea's growing nuclear and missile threats. The drill took place in the EC and involved the three countries' Aegis-equipped guided missile warships, South Korea's largest destroyers Haejong the Great, the USS Barry, and Japan's Atago destroyer. Based on a computer simulation, the Allies practiced information sharing to increase their ability to detect, track, and intercept incoming ballistic missiles. A Joint Chiefs of Staff official said South Korea and Japanese forces practiced missile detection and information sharing, while the US warship intercepted the projectile.
South Korea, the US, and Japan have strengthened our security cooperation and response system through this maritime missile defense training.
The exercise seems to have been organized in response to North Korea's intercontinental ballistic missile launch on Saturday, which was followed by 2 short-range ballistic missiles on Monday morning. It's the second such drill that the three countries have held since last October. Seoul's Defense Ministry says the trilateral maritime defense drill will continue to be held as part of joint efforts on deterring Pyongyang's growing threat to regional security.
I think we're going to see more exchanges when it comes to intelligence between Korea and Japan, and also between the three of them, Korea, the US, and Japan, through the mechanisms that they already have in place. In this sense, Korea and Japan complement each other because if we look at North Korea, Korea has better assets on the ground, but Japan has better satellite surveillance.
Meanwhile, the naval commanders of the three nations met in Yokosuka, Japan, at the US 7th Fleet Command and discussed ways to strengthen information sharing and further coordinate joint exercises. They strongly condemn North Korea's recent missile launches as a serious provocation that harms the peace and stability of the international community, as well as the Korean Peninsula. Later on Wednesday in Washington, D.C., Seoul and Washington are scheduled to hold discussion-based tabletop exercises, which will focus on contingency planning and procedures upon a nuclear attack by North Korea. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Elsewhere, just a day after announcing plans to suspend a nuclear arms control pact with the U.S., Russia's Vladimir Putin has shared intentions to strengthen Moscow's nuclear weapons capability. Our Ising Jae has more on what this means.
In a video address marking Thursday's Defender of the Fatherland holiday in Russia, President Vladimir Putin said his country will now pay increased attention to boosting its nuclear forces while equipping its armed forces with the latest advanced equipment and weapons. This includes Russia's plans to begin mass deliveries of Zircon sea-launched hypersonic missiles. His comments also come just a day after he announced that Russia will be suspending the New START nuclear weapons control treaty between Moscow and Washington. Putin's comments on suspending the New START treaty and focusing the country's attention on boosting its nuclear forces are raising concerns that Moscow might be headed toward preparing for a nuclear war. However, in a response to the growing fears, Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov held a conference call with reporters on Wednesday, stressing that suspension of the treaty does not increase the risk of a nuclear war. Instead, Peskov added that Moscow is willing to return to adhering to the treaty as soon as the West is ready to consider Russia's concerns. Meanwhile, in a meeting with leaders from NATO's eastern flank on Wednesday, U.S. President Joe Biden said President Putin made a big mistake by suspending his country's participation in the nuclear arms control treaty. Biden sat down with the leaders of the so-called Bucharest Nine to show his support for security in the region. The leaders of countries located close to Russia, including Poland, Bulgaria, and Romania, voiced the need to strengthen defense capabilities on NATO's eastern flank and to prepare for potential threats from Russia. In a joint statement adopted on Wednesday, the leaders of the B9 vowed to strengthen deterrence and defense power across the entire eastern region, while also condemning Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Korea's future is looking grimmer as new data shows the country breaking its own record for the world's lowest fertility rate. My colleague Om Ji-young has more on this alarming demographic trend.
South Korea again last year saw the number of babies born fall to an all-time low. That's according to the report released on Wednesday by Statistics Korea, saying there were around 249,000 births last year. It's a decline of around 11,000 or more than 4% from a year earlier. The number of births in the country has been dropping on year for 7th consecutive years, falling below the 400,000 mark in 2017, then 300,000 3 years later. Then last year, it plunged below 250,000. Also, the fertility rate, which is the average number of babies a woman is expected to have in her lifetime, fell last year to 0.78. This is the first time it's fallen below 0.8 and is the lowest figure since data was first compiled in 1970. Statistics Korea says the main driver was the drop in new marriages.
The number of new marriages last year also fell to the lowest since 1970 and is also one of the reasons for the low birth rate. The number of births is expected to keep falling in the future due to the continued decline in new marriages.
South Korea also had the lowest fertility rate among 38 OECD countries in 2020 with a figure of 0.84. This is less than half the OECD average of 1.59. Meanwhile, the number of deaths last year rose to 372,000, up 17% from a year earlier. This resulted in the natural decrease in the population of 123,000 last year, more than double the number the year before. Om Ji-young, Arirang News.
In related news, Seouls Health Ministry has shared tangible measures to address the national shortage of pediatricians as President Yoon Suk-yeol highlights the importance of accessible medical care for children. Here's our top office correspondent Kim Do-yeon.
South Korea is looking to improve its healthcare system for young children. Currently, according to the Health Ministry, the country is seeing a shortage of pediatricians, while some medical facilities specifically for children are having to be shut down. This leaves some parents helpless during dire situations, especially outside the capital region. And so on Wednesday, 3 major goals were announced. 1. Quickly expand medical infrastructure for severe pediatric cases. 2. Overcome blind spots in children's medical care. And 3. Expand manpower through fairer compensation. Specific plans included creating 4 more public children's hospitals to add to the current 10 and expanding support for the existing ones. Creating a 24-hour hotline and video call system with pediatric professionals and the test running of a compensation system for business losses incurred by children's hospitals. In addition, the ministry will lay out the requirements for the 45 top recognized medical centers, which include having a pediatric center and 24-hour emergency care for children. This comes as President Yoon Suk-yeol had already called for such policies to be implemented and on Wednesday went to visit Seoul National University's Children's Hospital to see the current situation. Saying that protecting children's health is a country's first and foremost responsibility, he acknowledged the dire situation himself.
우리 사회가 많은 부분들이 발전했는데도 불구하고 아마 출생률이 자꾸 떨어져서 그렇지 오히려 과거 저희들이 잘할 때보다도 지금 이런 소아과 병원이 많이 부족하다고 하는 얘기들이 많습니다.
In a briefing after the event, the presidential spokesperson said Yoon has called for immediate changes.
The president said doctors avoiding becoming pediatricians is not their fault, it's the government's fault, adding that he said what was discussed on Wednesday has to be implemented well and there's nothing more urgent. So if the national insurance isn't enough, the government should put in some of its budget for these changes.
During his visit, President Yoon also met with some young patients fighting severe diseases. This included a cancer patient of 19 months. Yoon showed his support for the parents and medical staff fighting with them. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
In other news, K-pop sensation BTS has ranked second on the 2022 chart for top global artists, according to the International Federation of the Phonographic Industry. This marks the group's third year in a row to rank among the top three, having topped the chart in the years 2020 and 2021. According to the organization, the list is compiled based on an artist's or group's worldwide performance across digital and physical music formats during the year. K-pop acts 17 and Stray Kids ranked 6th and 7th respectively. Taylor Swift took the #1 spot. SM Entertainment has granted Kakao exclusive rights to circulate its albums and music. According to industry insiders, the transfer of rights was part of a contract Kakao signed earlier this month to buy a 9.05% stake in SM Entertainment. The contract between SM and Kakao sought to prevent a takeover bid by rival K-pop company HYBE. HYBE is currently SM's largest shareholder, having recently purchased a 14.8% stake in the agency. The two companies will collaborate on the distribution of music overseas and set up a separate venture for global auditions for new K-pop groups. Urban air mobility is looking to become a broader reality here in Korea in 2 years' time. Authorities on Wednesday laid the groundwork to pave the path for commercial and civilian drones. Our trade correspondent Shin Ha-young has the latest.
Even though urban air mobility is yet to be commercialized around the world, its market outlook is bright. Morgan Stanley projects the global UAM market to rise to $1.5 trillion by 2040. South Korea aims to commercialize it in the year 2025. The government has come up with the Korean UAM demonstration project known as the K-UAM Grand Challenge, which tests UAM aircraft safety, traffic management capabilities, and vertiport construction for commercialization throughout 2 phases in rural and urban areas. The country is set to kick off the first phase of the project as, on Wednesday, the Transport Ministry announced the agreements it has in place with 46 companies.
The project has been recognized globally as the first in the world that incorporates commercial communication networks like 5G into UAM traffic management. We will conduct a demonstration in an urban area next year, which shows we're moving at a relatively faster pace compared to other countries.
The K-UAM Dream Team is one of the consortia led by SK Telecom and Hanwha Systems, along with one of the more prominent players in UAM market, Joby Aviation, a California-based electric aircraft maker.
We will demonstrate how we can utilize our existing telecommunication business to establish an air communication network for UAM. We expect that our data and AI-based technology can provide the best services to customers.
Meanwhile, the government has vowed to provide various support, including the enactment of the UAM Act that's based on both regulatory exemptions.
Our priority is to create an institutional framework for UAM, which is why we plan to establish related laws in the first half of this year. To fly UAM, there are different types of aviation regulations. We will work together as soon as possible to find ways to ease these regulations and establish safety standards.
Under the government's support, the groups will demonstrate their technologies in the first stage of the K-UAM Grand Challenge, which will take place in Goheung, Jeolnam-do Province from August until the end of 2024. Shin Ha-young, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. In the West Bank, almost a dozen people have been killed and several injured following an Israeli raid. According to local health officials, at least 11 Palestinians have died and over 100 people were wounded. This after Israeli troops clashed with Palestinian gunmen during a 4-hour-long raid in the city of Nablus on Wednesday morning local time. Among those killed were 3 militants wanted by the Israeli authorities. A number of civilians also died. Of the injured, at least 80 reportedly sustained gunshot wounds. Israeli officials say they conducted the raid after a social media post reportedly gave them the real-time location on one of the wanted militants. But videos posted online appear to show Israeli troops shooting at unarmed Palestinian men. Meanwhile, Seattle has become the first city in the United States to outlaw discrimination based on the caste system. Seattle City Council approved on Tuesday local time the addition of casteism to its list of anti-discrimination laws. Originating in ancient India, the caste system in South Asian countries categorizes people at birth into a social hierarchy. People at the bottom of the caste system often receive slurs and discrimination, and in some cases violence. The system affects Indian and Hindu communities in particular, which have grown bigger in Seattle. The city is a tech hub with companies that have a large number of South Asian employees. Although casteism is banned under India's constitution, it still remains a societal issue. Over to Italy now, where global coffee franchise Starbucks has introduced a series of olive oil-infused beverages. Called Oleato, the range of drinks are made using Arabica coffee and a spoonful of cold-pressed extra virgin olive oil. The 5 drinks in the series include a cafe latte, a deconstructed lemon juice pairing, and an espresso martini, which uses vodka and vanilla bean syrup. For now, the new menu can only be found in Italy, but the franchise plans to roll it out to the United States in the spring, with Britain, Japan, and the Middle East following later this year. And finally, the scientific understanding about the origins of galaxies is being called into question. This comes after observations by the James Webb Telescope showed 6 massive galaxies near the start of the Big Bang that were much bigger than scientists had expected. They are thought to have been created between 500 million and 700 million years after the start of the known universe, which is estimated to be almost 14 billion years old. Current theory says that after the Big Bang, galaxy formation was small and then started to expand. But the presence of these large galaxies so close to the Big Bang clashes with almost all theoretical models. The find means that scientists may need to rethink how galaxies developed. Matthew Ashley, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. We had a more bearable start to the day, and highs are also rising fast to reach double digits in certain parts of the country. So please be aware of temperature swings and do dress accordingly to avoid catching a cold. And along with that mild afternoon, in the capital, Chungcheongdo, Gyeongsang-Pukdo, and west of Gangwon provinces will have dusty air today, and it looks like getting even worse tomorrow. Meanwhile, a dry weather advisory has been expanded to parts of Gyeongsang-Pukdo province, with humidity levels going down below 35% in areas with a dry advisory in place. Well, afternoon temperatures are similar to a tad higher than yesterday, hovering above norms. Bright skies are blurred with a dust in dust-affected area. Meanwhile, Jeju Island will see passing rain or snow tonight into tomorrow at dawn. Then east of Gangwon province will see another band of rain or snow from tomorrow afternoon into Saturday. And due to easterly winds, that snow could fall heavily in the area, so be well prepared for that. With that in mind, here's a look at the weather conditions around the globe.
Right, that ends our afternoon newscast, but do stay with us for our panel session coming up right after this break. See you in a bit.